meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, embarked on a relentless search for meaning. He pursued wisdom, wealth, pleasure, and power, but it all left him empty, chasing the wind. Like Solomon, we often chase meaning in all the wrong places. But what if the purpose we're seeking has been right before us all along? Join us as we journey verse by verse through Ecclesiastes and discover the ultimate truth where meaning in life can truly be found.
Morning, everyone. So I spent years counseling. My original training was in short-term brief therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I love counseling because my job was to help people experience wholeness, healthiness, to equip them with the skills to navigate the complexities of life, to navigate the challenges of broken life that sometimes confronts us in ways that we never imagined, even if it comes from ourselves. And so counseling was helpful because it is a helpful tool as we attempt to make life better for ourselves and others, relationships, our family, our friends. But there was a moment in psychology where the script was flipped. In other words, 3 psychologists began a journey to try to change the way that they approach psychology, because they had felt psychology had all become about the negative, what we call a deficit approach, in that they were trying to just fix problems. In other words, the focus was on mental illness, it was on schizophrenia, depression, it was on all of those things that we go to counseling for. Addictions, relationships that are problematic, trauma, all of those. And so they simply felt like we've got to chart a new course, a new path. And so 3 famous psychologists in this realm said, let's do something different. What if instead of focusing on a deficit-based model, that we focused on a strength-based model that says, let's look at what are those ingredients that create a happy, joyful life. Let's focus our efforts and our clinical work on finding things in the human life that bring happiness. Thus began one of the greatest changes in psychology of what we call positive psychology or pop psychology. This charted the course for the well-being movement. In other words, when you go into a library or a bookstore, there's an entire dedicated section to self-help. Thus began an emerging market for gurus and motivational speakers and self-help experts who all have at their heart the means to help you have a better life, a more inspiring life, better relationships, motivation. And their whole goal was to inspire you towards better. So this movement was a fantastic movement that started drawing out in us this pursuit of better, of healthier, of more positivity. But this movement didn't solve all the problems, for sure. It didn't answer all of the questions. There are still existential crises that humanity has because it never answered the greatest questions of what is the meaning of life, the purpose of life, where do we find enduring value? It didn't answer every negative thing that we still face. So this new scientific study towards happiness that was embarked upon didn't always solve the problems, because there are some things in life that simply hinder happiness, right? No matter how hard you try, we just don't get excited about colonoscopies. There's no book I'm going to read that gives me a positive attitude towards that experience. We're in that season, we're just months away from one of the most joyful seasons of the year, taxes. Aren't you excited to go see your accountant? Hey, it's our annual reunion. Let's celebrate. How much do I owe? No one gets joyful about taxes. If we could go deeper for just a minute, no one is ever happy about losing someone they love. about a relationship being lost. There's no joy in that. There's no book you can ever recommend me that will heal the pain of that level of loss. There's nothing you can motivate me with that is going to touch the hardest parts of my heart where I felt the pain of life. For there's some things that we just endure through. There's some things that we're just struggling through because life has its way of turning things upside down. There's no motivational speaker that's going to lift me up when I get the diagnosis that changes my life. For there are some things we just have to endure, persevere. And in those moments, we start answering the harder questions that surpass cool slogans and motivational quips. That these are the harder questions in life that force us to say what truly brings joy to our life that's going to overcome seasons and clouds of darkness. What is going to endure the test of time that will surpass careers and will surpass those moments in our life where we wish it would have been a little different. Still, there's a lot of things in life that aren't so contrast in nature of whether or not we're happy or we're sad or we're depressed or we're positive about life. There's still a lot of things that don't affect happiness, by the way, and here's what the research tells us, that smarter people aren't happier than dumber people. Some of you should be really happy about this. Now, I'm not sure which one you are. I tell Wendy, see, babe, you're not happier than me. That's not a negative thing. She's smarter than me. Wendy's a mathematician by academics, and she got me and all my friends through college math. So she's smarter, but not happier than me, according to the data. Men aren't any happier than women. Well, we know why. Hey, I didn't say anything. You took that to its logical conclusion, not me. I'm just looking at data. I'm a research guy. 20-somethings aren't more content than 80-year-olds. That's good to know. Youth is wasted on the young, right? If only we could go back. Would we not live differently? We would. But they're not happier. They're discontent. Oh my gosh, if we could get their age with our experience. Consumer cultures, which would be America, are 10 times more prone to be depressed than other cultures. This baffles me. How is it that we can have the world in front of us and still be depressed? How is it that we can have nice homes and have filled refrigerators and we can have vacations and yet it's not enough? Why are we still so prone for it to not be enough? Our relationships are broken. Our country is struggling with its identity. We're just so confused and wounded. And it feels like we should have it more together. We're the wealthiest country in the world and yet so broken. And so the statistics tells us things that sometimes should bother us deeply and should force us to ask the question, why are we this way? And then, of course, Californians aren't any happier than Nebraskans. If you're from California, welcome to LOCC. We're glad you're here. Salvation is on its way. And then finally, people in the happy countries, watch this, have higher suicide rates. Again, I can't reconcile those two things, can you? I just don't understand. Why would the happiest countries in the world have higher suicide rates? Well, you can go and look at the World Happiness Report. Not now, I'm talking. But later on, make a note. Go check out the World Happiness Report. It's an annual report of the happiest countries in the world based upon metrics and surveys. And they go to all the countries and they ask them certain questions and they evaluate how happy that country is. Well, can you guess the countries that are at the top? It's Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland. Oh, by the way, they have very high suicide rates. And yet you look at Syria, has one of the lowest suicide rates in the world. A country that's been war-torn for years by civil war, by unrest, political instability, poverty, and have yet one of the lowest suicide rates in the world. America has one of the higher suicide rates in the world. The most technologically advanced nation in the world, the wealthiest nation in the world. Why would we have the highest suicide rates? And Syria should be up there. So something's wrong with this picture. So if you dive a little deeper, you run across Philip Brickman at the beginning of this research, who was one of the leading early happiness researchers. He was at Michigan, and he served as a director of the Research Center for Group Dynamics, the Institute for Social Research. He published over 50 articles in academics, served on national committees across professional societies, all with the hope of helping people become happier and define what are those nuggets of truth that sustain joy in people's lives to raise these levels of encouragement and decrease the brokenness of society. New York Times did an article on Philip Brickman that you can check out sometime called Happiness Won't Save You. Because on May 13th of 1982 in Ann Arbor, Philip Brickman went to the tallest building in the city and jumped off of it. How can a man who spent his life dedicated to the research of happiness take his own life? It's why the New York Times led with probably the greatest statement that they could have concerning Philip Brickman was that happiness in and of itself will not save you. And yet you look across humanity, it seems to be the very thing that we chase in hopes that it would bring meaning, fulfillment. And what they're finding is essentially what Solomon has discovered as we journey with him through the book of Ecclesiastes, a book where the author is giving his last lecture, his last nuggets of wisdom, so that his students, us, could hear the wisdom of perhaps not finding ourselves in the same place that we're chasing after the wind. We're chasing after things that ultimately won't bring us what we hope it would. Solomon's been on a journey. He's inviting us a front seat to this journey to witness and explore and experience all of the wisdom that he's gained as a result of this. His pursuit is to find meaning in life, the ultimate meaning, our true purpose, lasting and enduring value. This is what he's after. And having introduced the theme a couple weeks with you, I tackled the first question, and that is, what is meaning? Is meaning found in happiness? Is it found in pleasure? Is it found in wealth? Well, using the language of a researcher, Solomon is going to conduct a happiness test because he's in a position to do so. So he tells us in chapter 2, verse 1, I said to myself, now let me pause there. Solomon's talking to himself. That's a red flag. Unless you do that. You know, you begin in the morning. So, how are you, good looking? Let's start the day out right. So Solomon says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. He's talking to himself, probably in the mirror. Come on, Solomon, I'm going to test you to find out what's good. We're going to be on this trajectory towards meaning and purpose and value, and we're going to explore through pleasure if that's where it's found. It's why I believe this is probably the most relevant book in America today. Because I believe that America is chasing after what Solomon has already experienced and hoping that they find real value, meaning, and purpose. And so this is a critical inquiry. He's in the lab experimenting to find the source of meaning, and perhaps it's found in pleasure. And he's going to test to see if it will bring this ultimate meaning he's after. And Solomon is well qualified to be the examiner of this test, by the way, because at the time he's the richest man in the world. And if you were this rich, you would have all the resources to test and experiment every component of pleasure that you could imagine. Secondly, he was in a season in Israel where people should have been happy. It was the golden age of Israel that has never been seen before or seen since. For Solomon had built the temple, and from the covenant perspective, the covenant had been fulfilled in Solomon's days, which David was prevented by the Lord from building the temple. So the Lord was blessing Solomon. It was a time of peace. There was no more wars and conflict. In fact, foreign leaders would come to learn from Solomon. How did you build such a great nation? Tell us about your wisdom. In this finest hour of Israel, their Dow Jones was through the roof. Economically, they were doing great. Banks were flourishing as they always do. Politically, they were the envy of the world. It was a perfect moment to explore the good life, because what else was Solomon going to do with his time? And ironically, Solomon's preliminary findings were this, that the good life he could summarize very quickly was this in verse 1. But this all proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? So these are the questions that he would start with. He was diving deep into things that would rub us wrong. How could he have such a flagrant attitude and say such a statement? He's the wisest man ever. Well, we're going to unpack this from verses 3 through 10 today, because I think his experiment will lead us to seeing that pleasure doesn't provide the meaning that we think it does. The first experiment that he did was with alcohol. Because come on, if you're going to party and have fun with your friends, alcohol was often the center of that. Not for you, but for everyone else. So in verse 3, he says this, I tried cheering myself with wine, with embracing foolishness. That's the party piece, foolishness. Hey, let's go drink and party. Essentially, that's the James translation. My mind still guiding me with wisdom, for I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. This sounds like YOLO to me, right? You only live once, so make the most of life. Go party and have fun. Because we don't have long to live. Solomon seems to have pursued this just long enough to see if there's any good in the party life. Yet he embraced this foolishness just enough without losing his head. In other words, he was engulfed in this lifestyle, but he still kept the sense about himself. He still kept it together. He still kept control because, if anything, he was experimenting. He wasn't given over fully to the lifestyle. He just wanted to test it. Is this really what will bring fulfillment? So he kept enough control, enough self-control to weigh the impact of that life and to ask those deeper questions. Is this fulfilling? Will this bring meaning to my life? Is there lasting value? Now time to move to the next pleasure. The number 2 experiment was with beauty and creation. It was here that he would use his vast resources to build probably the most beautiful gardens that the world has seen since Eden. Verses 4 through 6, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Solomon's assets and his power enabled him to build some of the greatest landscape architecture that the world had ever seen. He built palaces and houses. His own personal house took 13 years to build. Can you imagine that? Hey, honey, let's build a house. It'll be ready in a decade. He called together the great minds of his day to plant these vineyards, these orchards, pools of waters, pools, canals, all to irrigate his trees and his gardens. He did all of this, looking back to see, would this bring me ultimate fulfillment? Well, next, he experimented with pleasure of wealth and possessions, believing that if I can just amass enough, if I can just accumulate enough, if I have enough in my 401k, then baby, we're going to live the dream. And so in verses 7, he said this, I bought male and female slaves and other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. By the way, if we find anything of ancient Israel, there was so much that were made in gold and silver. It truly was the golden age, so much that their ashtrays were made of silver and gold. That's when you're running in the money. One gets a sense here that Solomon's life knew no limits. He could have it all. He purchased servants to serve him, to take care of this paradise that he built. I often think, man, how wonderful would it be if I had a personal chef? I would eat so much better, wouldn't you? McDonald's would go out of business. If I had a personal servant who would clean the house and mow the lawn and wash the cars, someone at your beck and call. Well, Elon Musk has promised that day's coming. Every one of us will get a robot who will do all of that for us. That's the direction he's moving, by the way. He said it will be the greatest single product in human history, and I don't think he's wrong. Imagine giving you a robot who will clean, cook, do laundry, wash the car, and mow the lawn. It will change the world. Well, Solomon didn't need a robot. He had thousands of servants to do this for him. He had cattle and sheep that were beyond count. His possessions unrivaled by Bill Gates and Hollywood's richest stars. A portfolio that Warren Buffett would be jealous over. He moved on and experimented with the pleasure of entertainment. He wanted to see if hanging out at Lake Sumter and Brownwood every day would fill his greatest needs. And it depends on who's singing, right? So he said in verse 8, I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I'm thinking, man, this is my verse. Not the harem part, the music part. Shame on y'all. Think of it. Solomon had his own bands to fill his houses, his gardens with music every day. It's like living in the villages. Except James Taylor, Bob Dylan, and Elvis are all in my guest house to give me private concerts every day. Can you imagine? Okay, Elvis, I'm tired. Go back to Vegas. Let's bring someone else in. And the greatest of all, the entertainment of Solomon was hundreds of women to be entertained with. But he's not finished. He moves on very quickly with the experiment of accomplishment, because for many of us, we set our life out to accomplish great things. Our careers were towards this course of, can we experience all that life can give us through a successful career? Higher positions, more authority, more people working, a sense of success. This drives our go-getter hustle movement of America today. Is everyone's after success. All of you should have 3 or 4 jobs. Because success will come when you don't have to answer to anyone and you have enough money to do whatever you want in life. That's when you'll be fulfilled. That's what we're being told every day on social media. And so these accomplishments, you think about these. When we look at these 5, this is the American dream. If I just have all of these things, a fun party life, creativity, beauty, wealth, possessions, entertainment, and accomplishments, this is the life. Or so we are told. He said in verse 9, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all of my wisdom, it stayed with me. I didn't ever lose control. I stayed the course. I denied myself nothing that my eyes desired, and I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all of my labor, and this was a reward for my toil. So he enjoyed his labor. He enjoyed his work. He was able to examine and see what he had accomplished, and there was some joy in that. But it didn't last. Solomon pursued things that would bring him fame around the world, attention that would set him apart from everyone else, make him great in the eyes of men, because it's something we like. We like being on top. We like being number one. We like being great at what we do. Many of you want to be great golfers. Can you imagine everyone saying, man, you're so amazing? My daughter and I were out yesterday. She loves garage selling, and she was in town, and she's like, hey, let's go garage sell. So we went around doing some garage sales, and I came up to one garage sale, and they had a whole bunch of golf clubs there, and they were like $200 and $100, and I whispered to my daughter, and I said, hey, my entire set of clubs cost what that one club cost. And she's like, I don't think you have good clubs. And I said, well, I'm not that good of a golfer. So the cost of my clubs matches my game. So maybe if I had a $100 club, I'd be much better. But we're always after more, aren't we? Better. We're always after to increase our skill sets, to prove to others we're great. Oh, by the way, that same garage sale had a whole table of Iowa State clothing, and it had prices on it. And I turned to him and I said, hey, is this how much you're going to pay me to take these? And they looked at me and said, oh, no, sir, that's how much they cost. And I said, no, you pay me that, and I'll take these off your hands and donate them. And then they finally smiled. We measure greatness by how many games we win, how high we got up on the career ladder. This is how often people will measure our life. How was Solomon great in the eyes of those around him? There's certainly an amount of pleasure that comes in being great at what you do. Yet in the midst of this, wisdom still stood with Solomon. He didn't lose his senses in all of this, but somehow he kept his focus. Somehow it did bring him some joy, but it didn't seem to last. To realize that he could have anything he set his eyes on, which is what verse 10 tells us, every wish was fulfilled. Take a walk with me for a moment with Solomon. As we walk through his gardens and we get a glimpse of it all, servants giving him the best of French wine, the flowing gardens and the scent of flowers blooming, the reflection off the ponds and pools of waters that he had created, the taste of fresh fruit from his trees and his plants, servants who would wait on your every need, who filled your table with ribeyes done medium well, because anything less than that is disgusting. Imagine sitting there eating your medium well steak while Billy Joel is singing A New York State of Mind, and you're enjoying life with 10 of your most beautiful wives. Wendy would be number 1. No, you 9, that's Wendy's seat. Know your place. And everyone at the banquet saying, James is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time, isn't he? What normal human wouldn't want to experience this kind of life? Who seems to have had all of greatness, of wealth, of fame, of wisdom, resources, an entourage of music and servants, and the most beautiful of vision walking out of your bedroom each day and taking a look at all that God had blessed you with. Who wouldn't want this as their second home? But then Solomon does something. He surprises us. After all of this, his findings are found in verse 11. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. He discovered that pleasure didn't answer his quest for meaning. It didn't solve the deepest existential questions of his life for value and purpose that would endure and last and stand the test of time. I now turn to my greatest philosopher, Jim Carrey, who said this: I hope everyone could get rich and famous and will have everything they ever dreamed of so they will know that it's not the answer. What a powerful statement from a guy who probably read Solomon. Because this was Solomon's finding after all. I wish all of you could have all of it to realize that it's not what matters the most. The experiment was nothing more than a striving after the wind, a meaningless chase. His projects, his pleasures, all had no lasting values in and of itself. Here's what the experiment did reveal to us. First, we chase after the wrong things for the wrong reasons. It's not that pleasure and happiness and doing great projects are wrong. There's nothing wrong in that. There's joy to be found. Even Solomon found joy in some of this. But his point is, it doesn't last. It's not going to endure time. And God loves to see his people happy. He's not some cosmic killjoy that's just waiting to enforce more rules on our life and to rob us of joy and happiness. He'd want nothing more than to see his children flourish in happy and loving life. But he also knows we live in a broken, fallen world that was broken because of us and our own sinfulness. And so things in the world seem to fall apart. They seem to be lost. They seem to be broken. And in this, it's our pursuit of life that often misses the mark. Because it's not that we can't find joy and happiness in the things of life, but to chase after those things as if that's where true meaning is found misses the point of life. And that's why this is the most relevant book, I believe, to our culture today, because I think that's what our culture is doing, is they're chasing after the wrong things for the wrong reasons in hopes that they bring meaning in life and value. And we wonder why our suicide rates are so high and depression is so high and people are so unhappy, because they tend to never meet the greatest needs. We still run and chase like a hamster in a wheel, over and over again, chasing and never getting enough, never arriving, never feeling fully satisfied. C.S. Lewis said this, that we are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Isn't that profound? It reminds me of the scriptures. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all other things will be added unto you. What are you chasing, thinking that it's going to bring life to you? The second thing is we overestimate earthly pleasures, don't we? Eldridge says that we give them ultimacy and urgency that were never intended to bear. Wealth, sex, achievements, accumulation, these things are all fleeting. They're only good for a season and they never last. For humans have the tendency to chase after the next thrill, don't we? The next exciting thing, hoping that it's going to bring us pleasure and satisfaction. You always heard the saying that grass is always greener on the other side. Well, that's because they use more manure to fertilize it. I wonder sometimes, though, if they're not right. I think grass is greener on the other side. Here's the problem, that once we get there, it fades just as quickly as our grass did. It's green and beautiful, but everything that's green and beautiful eventually fades. You can stop by my yard anytime and see this. I thought about who's still alive that once had it all. Look at these pictures and tell me if you remember them. Dick Van Dyke had it all at one point, the top of the actor in Hollywood, famous. Dick is 99 years old. Mel Brooks, the comedian, 98 years old. Buzz Aldrin, once on top of the world, literally, 95. Any Frankie Valli fans in here? 3 of you. I knew I should have used someone different. Frankie Valli's 90. How about I Dream of Jeannie? Did y'all watch that show? She's 93. I look at all of these famous people that have now been replaced by other famous people. They're no longer headliners. They're no longer invited to be stars of the show. You can find them somewhere near Santa Barbara on a tour of the stars. But they're fallen stars now because they're no longer on top. They're no longer A-listers, still famous in their own right, still accomplished. But they no longer hold the same value. No longer as beautiful as they once was, especially Mel Brooks. You may be satisfied for a season. You may be on top for a season. You may be famous and everybody wants your autograph for a season, but that can fade. For what was true in one season no longer satisfies in the next season. You need to find something more, something better to make you happy. So we go through every season longing for the next season where we're going to be even happier. And sometimes we miss the season we're in could just have well been the best season of our life. Third and final, Solomon found that enduring happiness, fulfillment, and pleasure is often found in another place, somewhere else. Solomon doesn't tell us where yet. You're going to have to come back next weekend to hear more of the story. But Scripture points to the one who can help us discover this. For there's no other greater statement in the history of humanity when it comes to joy and happiness in life than this statement by Jesus himself. It's my life verse. I have come to give you life and yet give it to the fullest. The most meaningful life. The greatest life you could ever imagine. Not a life filled with entertainment and accomplishments and a wealth of servants and materialism, but a life filled with joy nonetheless. A life that will overcome seasons of adversity and diagnosis. A life that overcomes our brokenness and our hurts. A life that will endure the test of time. A life that is eternal, for Jesus' promise was given through his work on the cross, where the Father said that he has sent the Son to give us life, and whoever would believe in him would have everlasting life and not perish. For this is the life that he offered us. It was a life with true meaning, a cup of water that would quench a thirst that no other drink could ever quench. A life with meaning, a life with value, a life that at its heart is a forgiven life, that is where we are loved unconditionally, one of happiness and true joy that surpasses the struggles. It is a life of faith that gives us a reason to live and even a purpose to die for. It is the promise of purpose that surpasses this age and leads us to the age to come. It is a promise of transcendent hope that this is just the beginning for those who follow Jesus. Because there is a life to come that is waiting for us, where in this life there'll be no more tears, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more depression, no more heartbreak, where we will be perfect and whole, and we will walk with God once again. It is this that he points us to, a life with real meaning that isn't simply chasing after the wind. Father, thank you for your message from Solomon this morning. Thank you for his words that should be as a double-edged sword that sharpens us, convicts us, and draws us near, but that also endears us towards your affection. Thank you for your love for us. Forgive us, Father, for we have chased after the world. All of us here have chased after other things. We've fashioned our own idols in hopes that they would meet our needs, satisfy our longings, our desires. Forgive us, for you are the one all along who would meet our greatest needs, would bring us the greatest peace and contentment that would satisfy our souls. Help us to turn to you and chase after the things of the kingdom instead of the things of the world. In Jesus' name I pray. Would you stand with us as we close in worship?